Hello again, this is Serak and I'm back here with another video. Today I'm going to talk through some monsters that when you're playing on a budget you might want to look at having copies of because they can go in lots of different decks and they're all relatively cheap cards that you can use to hold your opponent back. They might go in your side deck, they might go in your main deck, and they can all be used in a variety of different decks in a variety of different situations. So this is part one of a three-part series where we'll talk about monsters today, and then in the future we'll look at spells and traps, and then extra deck monsters. And these are just all cards that you can use to try disrupt your opponent's strategy on a budget. So the first thing we're going to talk about, Kaijus. So I've got Gamciel here because it's the most commonly used one, but any Kaiju really works. All it really does, the relevant effect is it's a tribute over an opponent's monster that can't be stopped by just about anything. So as long as you can out a vanilla monster, the Kaijus can help you. It's really good against sort of towers type boss monsters, so against Dragoon or similar things like that, or boards with lots of negates that you would have to bait your way through. Well, you can just say, nope, your Borreload Savage is now gone. Slap a Kaiju on it. And then that's them losing potentially 4 negates that they would have had access to otherwise. So it's a really good card that you can use. Any Kaiju works. They're all relatively cheap. Gamciel is the most expensive of them, but any Kaiju works as long as you can out it. So next, we're going to look at another form of monster disruption. Dino Wrestler Pancratops, which was at 3 until the start of this year. Again, very easy to summon, very good card going second. It forces negates, it beats over things because it's 2600 body. It's a quick effect, so you can chain it to things. So you can stop continuous effects. You can stop anything, really. You can chain it to anything they use unless you can't specifically chain to it. And remember, it can also blow up back row. So you can stop any pesky floodgates or similar as well with it if its effect can go off. And again, it's just very good at baiting out negates. Will set you back about 50p a pound a copy. So there's no reason not to have copies of this. So next we have Chaos Hunter, which is very similar to another card, Artifact Lancia. Both of these have a similar effect that involves banishing cards. Chaos Hunter, you get a 2/5 body with it as well, but your opponent has to special summon a monster, and you have to discard a card, whereas Artifact Lancia, you contribute it from the hand, and for the rest of the turn, neither player can banish cards. So Lancia is the differences between the two. Lancia is a quick effect that you can activate at any time, either from the hand or from the field, and prevents both players from banishing. It's a symmetrical effect. Chaos Hunter, a little bit more investment, but you get a monster out of it, and only stops your opponent from banishing cards. But fundamentally, they both do the same thing. They can be really, really destructive against decks that like to banish cards a lot. It can, when Orchestra was a thing, a Lancia at the right time could just end their turn, and they wouldn't be able to do anything. Next is a very useful extender that you can pick up very cheaply. It's Paralytic Seed. So this is a free rank 4 for any deck that Link summons. So it allows you to make a Baguska, an Abyss Dweller, a Tornado Dragon, similar. It's a common, it's very, very cheap. It's about £1, £1.50, £2 for a play set of the card. Maybe a bit more, I'm not entirely sure right now. But it's very, very cheap. It's very useful. It's a free extender. Now we're going on to hand traps, and for this we're going to talk about a number of different cards. And the cards I've got here are these ones. So, Veiler, DD Crow, Nibiru, and Ghost Girls. So, Vela is probably the best cheap hand trap at the moment. It's a couple of pounds a copy. It's almost as good as Impermanence. It's not quite as good, but for a tenth of the price of Impermanence, it does a pretty good impression. DD Crow, again, at a critical point in a combo, can just end turns. It's absolutely dirt cheap. It goes in absolutely every deck that has space for it. So, again, why wouldn't you? Nibiru is a little bit more expensive and a little bit more situational, but is such a big power card against the combo decks, especially in a format right now where there's a lot of Hulk Linkross combos running around. Decks are summoning so many times in one turn that a Nibiru at the right moment just wipes their field, ends the turn, and then you just have a big vanilla to out the next turn. Finally, we get onto the Ghost Girls. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is a way of answering problematic monsters on the field. But note, the monster has to be on the field, so you can't use anything that activates in the graveyard. It can also stop spells and traps, so it's also very useful in that regard. Another important thing to note is it is a psychic monster, which means you can summon it with emergency teleport should you need it, and that can be relevant because sometimes you just need an extra level 3 tuner on the field to continue your plays. So now, the most expensive hand trap in the set will set you back about 6, 7, 8 quid at the moment, depending on where you get it from, what version you go for, whether you get a common or the Dual Devastator alt art version or ultra rare version, or you can go all the way up to about £40 if you want a secret rare version. It's the best hand trap in the game for a reason. It stops searching, it stops sending cards to the graveyard, it stops special summoning from the deck. It does absolutely everything. It's a tuner. It's also relevant in that place. It's an 1800 defense wall, which again shouldn't come up, but does come up more often than you think if you're both in top deck mode and you just need to put a wall down. It's the best hand trap in the game, and I would really, really recommend that you bite the bullet and pick up these. If your local game store or wherever you buy your cards from has copies of the Soulburner structure deck in stock for a reasonable price, definitely pick up 3 of those. It's almost a complete Salamangreat deck with very few upgrades needed on a budget at a very cheap price, and you get a copy of Ash Blossom in each deck as well. So you have very little to lose from that. And then finally, the last card I want to talk about is probably the most specific one here, and it's Artifact Scythe. Now, this card needs a bit more setup. Ideally, you want either a way to pop it during your opponent's turn, or you want to be playing an artifact engine, such as Artifact Sanctum. And I have a deck profile on the way with an artifact engine in it to show you a bit later, a bit further in the future. It completely locks your opponent out of the extra deck for the turn that it's summoned. So again, so many decks will just be unable to do anything in their turn at all. It's really, really cheap. It's under £1 a copy. It's specific, but it's so cheap and such a devastating effect that it should really be run in more decks, I feel. So that's all the cards that I wanted to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be back in the future with more deck profiles, more cards I feel that you should have access to as a budget player, and I hope you have a very good week.